So I recently launched my first own app, and it's called Map My Day. So I'm going to talk about some of the back idea of it, what I wanted to solve, and a bit of how I solved it. So who am I? I'm 32 from Växjö. I started developing only 2 years ago. I hadn't developed at all before. So I started an education that was specifically for app developers. I have a cat named Oliver at home, and I'm currently working as an iOS developer at Knowit Mobile here in Stockholm. So the thing I wanted to do with my app was that I wanted to fetch location in the background. And there are some ways to do this, and I tried to look into most of them. I also decided that I wanted to store that information in the cloud. And since I was fetching it in the background, I was trying to figure out a way to do this efficiently. And also, I wanted to make a timeline for the user so the user could back to an earlier date and see where they had been. So this is my app on App Store. And I wanted to start by showing it before I go further. So the first screen that the user meets is just some random information, not random information, but information that just says that keep your phone with you at all times and the app will save the data in the background. The next screen is that I chose to start with 2 different logins, Google and phone number based login. And this is, and I'm coming to that, but I'm using Firebase for basically everything. And they offered a phone number login through text messages. And they have a really high rate of what you can do for free. So I wanted to try out and see how that works. So if you're logging in, and also the country code that I have on the side is, I tried to figure out a good way to get that depending on where in the world the user is. So I decided on picking out the locale of the phone and then picking out that country code and setting that as a standard. And if you tap it, you can select any of, like in the world. I found some list online that I just crammed in and I hope it works. So if we log in using a phone number, Firebase requires that you have to verify you're not a robot. And obviously I passed. So in this view, I decided, because I wanted to do some kind of like half-neat animation, like when you're entering your phone number, it looks kind of nice. And I decided to have text views. So 1 text view for every number. And then I have another text view that's like all the way down here, that's hidden, that the user actually types into. And then every time that text changes, I update the labels. So I can just press my verification code that I got. And before I let the user in, I wanted them to accept location services. And since I'm fetching the data in the background, you have to allow background usage. And Apple doesn't allow you to only require background usage anymore. So if a user chooses something else, I just block them out and send them to the settings so they can change it. So if I go to always allow, the next button is lit, and I can go in the app. So this is my day so far. And if I choose date here, I can go back for instance, on when I was traveling really far. So it points out a lot of locations, and you can zoom in, and I can see that I took a small detour here, like leaving a friend. And you can also see like how like the same pattern goes on every day, like when you go back and forth to work, and also when you go grocery shopping, you do the exact same markers. Also, I chose to have some settings, and I'm going to go into this, but since I'm storing everything in the cloud, there are some issues with like GDPR, because this is really sensitive data, GDPR-wise, and I had to do some kind of easy, quick way for the user to just delete and wipe all their data. So I wrote a Firebase function, and it's called, like, are you really sure? Because it just wipes everything, and then the user is left with nothing left. I also chose to do a lock with Face ID and Touch ID. So the first thing I do here is that I check if the user has either Face ID or Touch ID, and then I set the label and the image depending on what they have. So if I activate it, I also, because I had an idea that it might happen that someone is using the app, closes it in the background, someone goes in and tries to snoop. So I also blurred the whole view if the user isn't there. And next time you open it, it requires Face ID. Also, to turn it off, I require Face ID. And the last thing I have so far in the app is that you can show all data points. And I've been having this for quite a while now, but you can see like just the basic data. So I'm really like trying to be transparent with what data I'm storing. And you can export it as a CSV and just open it in Excel or whatever you please. So while I was thinking about what I wanted to do with the app, I ran into some like problems and questions that I had. The first one was like, okay, Google Timeline already exists. A lot of people use it. What happens when the user loses connectivity? Because like if your data plan runs out, or if you go into a tunnel or anything. GDPR, of course. And also battery usage, since we all know that fetching like location too often isn't very efficient battery-wise. When I was thinking about this, I immediately just crossed this one because I don't care about if Google has it, because I wanted to do my first thing and just get started with it. So I had a look into Apple's documentation, and I was seeing that they had this significant change location service. And see, they mark it as power friendly, so that was nice. And also, they mark it that you have to move a significant amount, such as 500 meters or more. So I decided on doing a setup using a third-party library called Swift Location. And this was because I wanted to get started fast, and I didn't want to start with looking into all location service thingies and how you fetch everything. So this is a very lightweight library that fixes everything about asking the user for permission, fetching background location, and also reverse search. So you can use a geolocation and then search for an address. So with significant location change, as I showed, it requires you move 500 meters or more. If any other apps use the GPS on the phone, it triggers even more even if more movement is less than 500 meters. And as I was driving my car, I didn't find this in documentation, but I was driving my car with my GPS running, and I could see that it had like exactly 5 minutes between the markers. So this is where I'm working at Knowit, and this gives me a radius of 500 meters. And during a day, that's quite much. Because whenever I go for lunch or running errands, so if I pop up here, here, or here, it doesn't update my location at all. Until I go here, and then it gives me a new 500-meter radius. And I was like, okay, good enough. Because I was like, this is a good start. I just want to try and do it, make it work, and just ship it to begin with. So I started with this third-party library, Swift Location. And when you do a subscription to a background location that uses significant location change, you have to resubscribe every time the app is opened, even though if it's open in the background or in the foreground, which means that in my did finish launching with options, I had to do a check if it was location that opened it, and then I had to resubscribe. And when you do the resubscription, it picks out the location, and then I could send it to Firebase. And at first, I was like, okay, I don't really care if I don't have any like error handling more than like it shouldn't crash. But if it fails on upload, I was like, okay, I'll handle that later in like an update or so. I just wanted to try and get the whole thing up and running. But I found out that, and I actually already knew this, but I didn't think of it, that when you use Firebase, you don't need like a local database, because if you're trying to push something to Firebase and it fails, it just stores it locally until the user gets their connectivity back. So I went like 2-3 days without my, because my data plan ran out. So I could actually try and look into this if it worked. And it worked perfectly. And it just did as many markers as it did the days before. But the negative part is that it requires login, because you kind of don't want to keep the whole database open. I don't think that would be very popular. And not all users want their info, especially not this info, in the cloud. So that's a con, and also GDPR. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in writing privacy policy, and making sure that the user could see all their data and remove all their data, and be sure that they felt that they are the owners of their own data. Yesterday evening, I looked into the usage of my app, and this is the world looks really strange here, but this is the first 3 weeks, recently past 3 weeks. So I think like today or tomorrow, I will pass, I think, 100 users. So it's good for not doing any marketing at all, more than like posting Facebook message or in the Slack channel for CocoaHeads. And I made, it's made, I think, 36,000 locations that's been stored so far. And I also noticed that since I'm using the free tier of Firebase, when I fetched all of these, I ran out of all requests that were free, which was a very bad idea. Because the next time I opened it, and I was like, okay, I'm just making sure that everything works for the presentation. It's like quota limit reached. So I had to do like a very quick upgrade to my Firebase account. Luckily, it's very cheap, but I also became very aware that I did some very lazy fetching, not lazy as in what we've heard recently, but that I'm just fetching all the data all the time. And I've been using this since I started developing it in the middle of December. And I gained, like, my account has a lot of data points. And if I'm fetching all of those all the time, it quite fast goes up to the quota limit. So without me fetching all of these, on a daily basis with 100 users, I had like 27,000 requests to the database. And I was like, okay, I'm fetching all the data and looking through like what dates the user has. And I'm fetching all the data to make sure that, like, I'm fetching all the data all the time. So that's this week's mission, to just lower that to like as low as possible. But I looked into the price that Firebase has, and it's for 100,000 requests, they charge like 1 krona and 50 öre. So I was like, it's still going to be okay, but not in the long run. So far, how did my users respond to this? Well, 40%, about 40% of those who visit the app page on App Store has downloaded the app. And of those, I think like 93-94% created an account. And over 65% chooses the phone login. And this could be because it's no like Facebook button, which people are used to. And they see like a Google button and go like, why? But it's fun because the phone login is free for, I think, 10,000 logins a day on US and India, and 10,000 logins a day for the rest of the world. And it's kind of funny when you start getting reviews, how you can see that you can niche your app very niched. And I had to look up what an OTR trucker was. Because and he's been waiting for 15 years, and I was like, I started talking about that Google already has this, so I don't think he looked that much into it. But an OTR trucker is those long distance truckers that drive like big lorries from one side of the US to the other side of the US. So yeah, it's fun that someone finds a good usage of it. And I also found out that some pilots use it, so they can see like which airports they've been to throughout the day. And I actually asked for a screen dump for one of them, and just to see if it made like marks every 5th minute or if it didn't. But it had like one in Stockholm, one in Dubai, and then yeah, so it was like 1 point on each spot when they landed. So my next steps for this app is making heat maps. And I'm looking into, because now I want to do as much stuff by myself as possible and not use third party. But if I can't figure it out, I will start using them and ship with it and then rebuild further on. Also select date ranges, because sometimes you want to see like throughout a week where you've been. Today you can just select one single date. Also, I wanted to show timelines using gradient polylines. So you can see like it starts in the morning with green and then it moves on to red, and you can follow it, because if you move back and forth a lot, the lines go very tightly and you can't really like make out where you've been and which direction. Sharing locations, for instance, like from a child to a parent, or for partners or anything. Also linking multiple authentication providers, because now if you log in with Google and then with phone number, they aren't linked, so you have to keep your data in one of the places. And Firebase has finished functions for this, so the user can just sign into anything and just maps everything automatically. Also, since it's an map-based app, I want to add iPad support so you can really zoom in and have fun with it. So since I'm a new developer, especially making apps for myself, I would say start using third-party libraries, because there is no need to learn everything at once. If there is something that has like 3,000 stars on GitHub, it probably is of some kind of good use to you. Firebase is free for most of the time if you don't do these crazy requests that I did. Get nice pics to use in the app. Many are free, and they usually say like on Flat Icon and many other sites that you have to credit the author, and as long as you do it, just like take professional pictures and icons instead of like doodling if you're not really good at it. And I would say spend a lot of time on App Store presentation, because it's like in any store that when you visit something, if it doesn't look good, you don't go in. And if it looks professional in the App Store, then you can like lure people in to start using your app. Yeah. Thank you.